The podcast you're about to listen to may contain random lines from musical theater, terrible attempts at regional accents, and a sincere discussion about mental health. You have been warned. Are you ready to start singing with your feet? Formidable! Allez, c'est parti! Non, nous ne sommes pas fous, nous ne sommes pas ivres, nous sommes juste dans la joie. Une joie profonde, nos cœurs elle inonde. Cette joie, elle vient du ciel. Non, nous ne sommes pas fous.
Welcome to Sing With Your Feet. My name is Lily Fields, and I'm going to be your fairy godmother for the next half hour or so. This week is all kinds of exciting because, well, this is episode 60. 60 episodes is a nice solid number, don't you think? That's like 30 hours of your fairy godmother waxing poetic on all kinds of topics, from postpartum depression to menopause and from sex to funerals. I was trying to think of the best possible way to celebrate 60 episodes. I considered doing one of those best of episodes where I pull out the best love segments of previous podcasts, but that seemed like a lot of work and not the creative kind of work that I love to do. I'm not saying that we won't do a best of episode, but that is not how we are going to be celebrating 60 episodes. Instead, we're going to talk about sex. Well, first, we're going to bring the big diverse themes of the last 60 episodes into perspective, tie them all together, and then we're going to talk about sex so that you can see why I am so geeky about what we've been talking about lately. First, let's play a little game. I decided to go to some of my listeners and ask them what have been their favorite takeaways from the podcast over the last 60 episodes, and I got some really great answers. So I'm going to give you the top 5, and honestly, if these top 5 are the only things anyone retains from anything that I might have said, then I feel like my work here is done. But unfortunately for you, the work of a fairy godmother is never done. But real quick, let's look at those top 5, just for fun. And I'm going to give you a quick summary of what each of those things were in case you're new around here, shall we? So number 5 on our top 5 roundup of the big ideas on the podcast, the Ideal Life Exercise. This is a series of 4 questions that we ask ourselves each day about one of the 19 different themes that make up our ideal life. There's a little work that we need to do before we can start doing this daily routine. First, I must define my ideal life by answering the prompt, in my ideal life, I am a person who, and answering it a million different ways until I come up with no more answers. We aren't answering in terms of what we have or in any way trying to define who someone else is. We are concentrating on ourselves, our attitudes, our behaviors, our state of mind. So if you want to hear more about that, go back to episodes 14 to 34 of the podcast, where I go into detail about the different themes and the questions that go into the Ideal Life Exercise. In today's episode, I will be referring to some of the Ideal Life themes, that is those 19 overarching circles in our giant Venn diagram that makes up our life. For fun and real fast, here are those 19 themes. In alphabetical order, just for fun. Body positivity and health, clean home, commitments, contentment, creativity, environment and ecology, gravitas, habits and routines, marriage, our passion, parenting, personality style, relationships, scheduling and planning, sexuality, spiritual life, wise decisions, and work. Coming in at number 4 in our celebration of the top 5 memorable moments of the last 60 episodes, it was a hats off to Layla Kelly and her catchphrase, talking about death won't kill you. Layla is a death doula in Montana. A death doula accompanies people facing end-of-life issues. You've heard of a doula, right? A person who accompanies birthing mothers? Well, Layla does that for people who are dying, and by the way, she's amazing. Layla was with us while we were talking about those ideal life themes, one by one, and she gave us her unique deathy angle on those 19 themes I just read off a minute ago. She and I both believe that giving ourselves permission to think about how we want to die or how we want to be remembered after we die can help us live better in the present. I want to really quickly plug her social media accounts because she is always out there posting short, informative, and often entertaining videos. Her handle is leaving.well.death.doula. I'll link to her in the show notes. Give her a follow. She also has a fantastic podcast that's called Death Becomes Her, which you can find anywhere podcasts can be found, like literally wherever you are listening to me right now, you can find Layla. So coming in at number 3 on the top 5, the closet inventory. Earlier this year, in episodes 45 to 54, we spent a heck of a long time talking about how our closet was way more than what we wear, but that it was a window into how we feel about ourselves and our lives. We talked about the relationship between buying clothes that we don't ever wear and our self-esteem, and how we can straighten out our relationship with ourselves and our closets by taking a shopping hiatus. The closet inventory was one of the tools I suggested to help us put some order to that tumultuous relationship with our wardrobe. It's nothing more than a spreadsheet that we fill in, taking note of the item of clothing, where and when we acquired it, how much it might have cost, how many times we've worn it, what we like about it, what we don't like about it, and any alterations it needs or that it has had. This spreadsheet, which I will also link to in the show notes, calculates the cost per wear. The cost per wear. It's one of those objective numbers that determines how hard a piece of clothing works in a wardrobe. We ended the conversation with a challenge to fall in love with what you already own. And in the process, maybe you might even fall in love with yourself. So coming in at number 2, like a firework on our best of review, it was the phrase, "You are not done sparkling yet." This was the title of an early episode of the podcast, and it's something that I do believe with all my heart. I believe that each one of us has a purpose, even though it may seem distant, either in time, like in the past, or in a future that we have a hard time imagining, or distant in that we have lost sight of the passions that used to animate our lives, and we have let ourselves become anesthetized to our purpose. In the early episodes of the podcast, that's like episode 1 through 6, I sought to remind you that you exist for a reason, that there is a unique and extraordinary destiny for you, and that the little silvery threads of destiny that were built into the fiber of your being, that you can get back in touch with those, with who you are, who you've always been, by remembering what used to bring you joy, and then you can start sparkling again. And in the number 1 slot, the top thing that listeners remembered hearing on this podcast is joy is a beaded necklace. And I'll be honest, this one surprised me too. But let's put it back into the context that we had originally talked about it. I think I was talking about how easy it is to articulate the things that are going wrong. And that when we do that, it is very easy to start thinking about our days in terms of all the bad moments. So I was encouraging our Cinderella to articulate even the tiniest good moment with words, because words make things real. When we articulate a good moment, it's like we're stringing together tiny little moments of joy onto the necklace of our day. Little moments, big moments. And the more we articulate them, the more our day starts to sparkle with beads of joy. I'll have you notice something. Even though for the last 4 episodes we've been talking about virtue, only one person answered my poll actually talked about virtue. So clearly, I haven't made that subject as droolingly exciting as I had hoped to. Maybe the rest of today's episode will change your mind on that, and I am certainly going to try. I want to give a great big thank you to everybody who participated in my poll on social media, and I think I'll be sending out your gift hopefully in the next day or so. Right now, we are going to take on a big, gigantic philosophical question. Are you ready? What is happiness? People have been studying this for centuries. I mean, there is a world happiness index, for crying out loud. Finland, Denmark, and Iceland top this index, in case you were curious. The country of Bhutan measures happiness of its citizens in the same way other countries measure gross domestic product. They call it the Gross National Happiness Index. When you look up the word happiness in the dictionary, it says, and I'm not joking, the state of being happy, which I'm certain is not a definition that will make any of us very happy. So then you look up the word happy, and here's what you find. Feeling or showing pleasure or contentment, or there is a second definition, having a sense of trust or confidence. I'm not sure I can go along with the idea of a World Happiness Index or a gross national happiness index, but it's not like anybody asked me. However, you are listening to me, so I am going to tell you why I think this isn't useful. Happiness. What brings us pleasure or contentment or builds a sense of trust or confidence, those are extraordinarily personal and idiosyncratic things. The World Happiness Index, or Bhutan's Gross National Happiness Index, sets forth criteria to judge happiness on. And I'll admit these are well thought out. In Bhutan, those criteria include living standards, health, education, environment, community, time use, psychological well-being, governance, and culture. Certainly, some of these are objectively measurable, but let's be honest, time use and psychological well-being are really, really subjective. The UN's World Happiness Index has its own research standards, but it remains really subjective. It's a kind of apples and oranges kind of thing. I love it that we are trying to objectively look at something so huge as happiness, but I think from my own limited fairy godmotherish perspective that even attempting to broadly class countries by their happiness or define a national happiness index, in that we are negating the only factor that can actually influence a person's experience of satisfaction or happiness with his life, and that is personal responsibility. Every human being on earth with agency over his or her own life has the personal responsibility to make decisions consistent with happiness. I'm not ignoring the genuine suffering of the oppressed or the impoverished. I did say that I was talking about people who have agency over their lives. Although I would say that even within the unfathomable context of oppression, I'm thinking of concentration camps and the people who experienced genocide, like what happened in 1994 in Rwanda. The humbling stories of survivors might even prove the point that I'm about to make here. The point that I want to make is this, and this is my definition, so go ahead and poke holes in it all you want to. Happiness is an issue of personal responsibility and is a function of making decisions consistent with our values. I'll come back to this definition in a little while, but I want to highlight another definition among dozens of possible theories of happiness. You've surely heard the word hedonism before. It's a philosophy that believes, broadly, that happiness is found in the preponderance of moments of pleasure and in the eradication of pain. Earlier, when the top idea that listeners remembered about the podcast was the beads of pleasure theory that I had elaborated, I remembered having a sidebar conversation with a listener about this and how I could possibly be leading our Cinderellas to believe that happiness is solely about the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain. This listener was concerned that I was pushing this hedonistic point of view, which I hoped was not what my Cinderellas thought I was doing. But I'll admit, my beads of pleasure theory does sound a lot like hedonism. I mean, we're seeking to articulate the moments of pleasure and trying to keep silent about the moments of pain. But I want to relativize this, maybe put a little caveat on it. By moments of pain, I could just be talking about not complaining when my kids won't put their shoes on fast enough when it's time to leave for school. And by moments of pleasure, I could mean having found a 1-euro coin on the sidewalk. My beads of pleasure theory existed specifically to help me get out of the haze of my postpartum depression, and shortly thereafter, the glories of the perimenopausal hormonal shifts. A tiny bit of optimism, not toxic positivity, but real, objective, glass half full kind of thinking, can be a savior when the light of joy seems to be curtained over in our lives. I will be the first to admit that finding the balance of the hedonistic seeking of pleasure and the non-toxic optimism, it can be elusive. There can be a lot of erring, a lot of bad decisions, a lot of regrets as we walk that line, seeking out that balance. But when you're suffering from depression, sometimes finding something, anything, that will make you feel something at all can be confused with having found happiness. This feeling something can become addictive, and it can lead to pursuing unhealthy behaviors. And this is why, as we say a lot around here, if you suspect that you are facing depression, please get professional help. That said, we all have seasons when we're just a little bit off, and remembering to articulate the good things can help us see the preponderance of the good things over the bad things. So, a little hedonism won't hurt, but don't stop there. I travel in churchy circles, and quite often I hear the criticism of the pursuit of happiness. God didn't make us to be happy, he made us to be holy, is one of the top-of-mind punchlines that I've heard many times over the years. And yeah, I get it. When we talk about pursuing happiness, it sounds like an incredibly selfish endeavor. I said it before, happiness is an issue of personal responsibility. But the way I see it, happiness is not a selfish pursuit. It is, instead, a responsibility. And there is a path to taking on that responsibility, a clear path, which has philosophical, biblical, and psychological components. And yes, this will come to no surprise to you, that path is virtue. We've said this before, but Aristotle himself told us that the pursuit of virtue is the path to happiness. So, sorry, this ain't even a churchy thing I'm trying to pawn off here. And I believe this. I believe this with every silvery fiber of my being. No one will ever be perfectly virtuous, whether we are pious churchgoers or not. And maybe, for the pious churchgoers out there, you might agree with me that perhaps there is some relationship between the holy, which you say that God made us to be, and the idea of virtue. But pious churchgoer or not, happiness is a personal responsibility that resides in the choice to make decisions according to our values, aka our virtues. So I want to make some points about virtue. Let me say this one more time, just to make sure that we're on the same page. Happiness, which is the destination of the path of virtue, is personal responsibility. Virtue is not a tool with which to bludgeon others into behaving the ways that we want them to, but it is a lens through which we can judge our own behaviors, our own thoughts, and our own attitudes. For those pious churchgoers out there that are still with us, here's a little translation of what I just said. How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye, you hypocrite? First, take the plank out of your own eye. Then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. It's from the book of Matthew, chapter 7 somewhere. And I am not calling you a hypocrite, FYI, because if I were, I am also a hypocrite. So let's just put that out there. We are not here to be judging someone else. Even less should we be legislating the behavior of others. Let me say that again a little louder for those in the back. We should not be legislating or judging the behavior of others. We must be examining our choices, our behaviors, our thoughts, our attitudes in the light of our values. We must be doing this first before we even start imagining to tell other people what is wrong with their behavior. We have enough work to do on ourselves. Trust me. I'm the person over here who has spent almost 20 years thinking about the pursuit of virtue. The more you study what motivates you, the more you realize how big that plank in your own eye is. And if we ever get to the place where that plank is completely out of our eye, and our splinters are healed, and our vision is perfectly clear, then we will need to grab a broom and a dustpan to make sure that we are consistently sweeping in front of our own doorstep to keep it clean. This is the work of an entire life. I've been at this for 20 years. And one of a few things that has changed about me in these 20 years is that I no longer have any pretension that I will ever be virtuous. But the other thing that has changed about me is that I am. Do I dare say this out loud? I'm really happy. I'm happy in the moment, and I'm happy overall. Miserable moment by moment too, yeah. But now I can recognize when it is my failure to make decisions consistent with my values that has made me miserable, or when, God forbid, it is my monumental hormone shifts that I cannot control that are making me miserable, or if it is someone else's behavior that's making me miserable. I want to be sensitive about saying this because this is not me bragging. This is just me being straight up honest with you. I have found something even better than happiness. I have found the virtue seeker's jackpot. I have found joy.
Elle me fait bondir et vibrer, crier. Elle me donne envie de chanter, danser. Elle pousse à agir, donner partager et tout simplement de sourire aimer.
You came to this episode because of the episode title, which is, lest you have forgotten, How to Have Great Sex. And after all that introduction, here we are, up to the main event. So one of those 19 ideal life themes that I read off at the beginning of this episode was sexuality. I identified early in this pursuit of joy that living out my ideal life in the arena of sexuality is rather propitious to happiness. It shouldn't be hard to argue this. I mean, it's kind of the very definition of moments of pleasure, n'est-ce pas? But usually, when people put sex and virtue in the same sentence, it is to prescribe or to prohibit certain behaviors. That is definitely not what I intend to do right now. A few months ago, I sat through a day-long training session. It was Christian Counseling 101, a beginner's guide to receiving couples. It was part of a larger training that I had signed up for. Anyway, I know. Oof. Within the first hour, I wanted to scream my head off. I just couldn't. I just could not listen to the couple who was giving our training. They went on and on about what was acceptable in the bedroom between two consenting, and in this case, they were commenting even about what was acceptable in the bedroom of two consenting married people. Like, I'm not terribly worldly, but these people would have been shocked by some of the things that I have had a passing interest in. And my irritation and my shock came not from the fact that they were talking about these things as red lines, but that they thought it was necessary to police the pleasure of consenting, and let me say that again, consenting adults, married adults in the privacy of their own home. Like, even if this charming couple have no plank in their own eye, I need those people to just be sweeping in front of their own doorstep for a bit. I am not going to get blue or detailed in this discussion about how to have great sex. I am not going to be too personal about my own sex life either. I have done a lot of research about sexuality, the biology of sexual response, sexual trauma and abuse, and sex education. Most of the books I have read are done by real scientists, real psychologists, real experts in the domain of sexuality, and not the opinions of some churchy people who are using their soapbox to yuck my yum. The stuff of sex, as it turns out, is not all terribly sexy stuff. But you will find me to be quite open-minded. Knowledge is power. And knowledge, just in case you want to roll your eyes at me for a second, Cinderella, is a virtue. And believe it or not, sex is about virtue and not how you are thinking that it is. So here's how it went down. I was doing my ideal life exercise the other day, and the theme was sexuality. I was going through my 4 questions that I tackle every day. What is working? What isn't working? What do I need to think about? What do I need to do to get me closer to my ideal life in this area? I told you this wasn't going to all be sexy stuff. I had, a week or so ago, put a note in the entry for that day under what do I need to think about, and cryptically I had scrawled, I want to be a better partner. Dress for the life you want. Yeah, it took me a few seconds to remember what in the world I was talking about too. I do this, I take notes on topics that I want to explore so that I don't lose time on internet rabbit holes or get caught up in theories that I don't have time to fully devote myself to. It's a way to keep myself from branching off in a million different directions all at once. We talked about this in earlier episodes of the podcast too, and it's incredibly helpful. Anyway, I digress. Can you tell that I am actively procrastinating talking about sex? Yeah, I think that's because I am. What did dress for the life you want have to do with being a better sex partner? It did not have anything to do with buying new clothes. That much was for certain. You know me well enough to know that. It came back to an idea that has been very much echoing around the cavernous empty space of my mind lately. Dressing for the life I want is shorthand for the golden rule. Like, I need to start acting like the kind of person who lives the life that I want to have. How I dress is the visible expression of who I am on the inside, and I need to figure out how to start acting like the kind of partner that I wanted to be. And this, of course, goes back to the golden rule. I need to do for others what I want done for me, and I'm telling you that this theory is literally all-encompassing. But the question was still out there. What kind of partner do I want to be? There is no objective measure of what makes a great partner, or even a better partner than I already am, which is the baseline hope that I was wanting to tackle at this point. I've been so deeply immersed in my theories about virtue and happiness that as I let that question sink in, what kind of partner do I want to be? I got out my virtue wheel. You know, the one with the color wheel, the orientations of the virtues and the intentionalities of the virtues. I linked to it last week, I think. I'll link it again this week. I started perusing it as if it would give me an answer, seeing as how all my theories seem to converge at some point. And I'll be darned, it did. The first word on the virtue wheel that caught my eye was the word generosity. And the little gears in my brain started turning. Yeah, the ideal sexual partner is generous. Not with money, although, no, I'm kidding, sort of. My ideal partner is generous with pleasure, with their attention, with their time. If I want to be a better sexual partner, I need to pursue the virtue of generosity, specifically in my sex life. Do for others, or in case do for my partner, what I would want done for me, right? Ooh, I thought, this is good. What else? My eyes landed on the word enthusiasm. Oh yes, an ideal sexual partner is enthusiastic. Enthusiastic about me, about my body, about my pleasure. If I want to be a better partner, I need to pursue enthusiasm in all those ways in the very specific domain of my sex life. The golden rule rules, right? Next word, teachability. Oh dear, yes, an ideal sexual partner is willing to learn about what brings me pleasure, even if it's unfamiliar. So if I want to be a better partner, I need to be teachable too. Creativity? Yep, that's totally desirable in a partner. And I have literally no shortage of creativity. So why didn't I apply that some to my sex life? Duh, why was I only thinking of this now? Observation? I hope so. I hope that my partner would know the difference between a tickle and a recoiling and discomfort. So I needed to start being observant too. Maybe even start taking notes. Who said the scientific method had to be boring? Self-control. It's about knowing how to cool off when it's not the right time. I definitely need to improve on this because my sleep hygiene has been suffering lately. Was that too much information? Curiosity. What is it that my partner really enjoys and how can I make that happen? Regularity. Not just about making sex a priority and setting a regular schedule for it. And if that doesn't sound romantic at all, let me tell you, I have 2 kids and a pretty full life. Sex has to be scheduled. But regularity is also about balancing out that aforementioned creativity with what we know works. Courtesy. I define this as a series of small sacrifices, and sometimes being a good partner is about making sacrifices so that our partner can get what would really make them happy. Or contentment. Being satisfied with what I have and not wanting what I don't or can't have. I think this is just so important to finding harmony in our intimate life. Recognizing that the partner I have and that I know and who knows me is worth more than the partner that I don't have but kind of find appealing. I went on for this I'm not joking, at least a half hour. I will not do that to you right now. Instead, I am going to list to you a bunch of virtues that I discovered were influential in living out my ideal life in the area of sexuality. And I want you to think about them too. Think specifically about that plank in your own eye. Don't be thinking about how your partner measures up. Think about how you measure up. Here they go, in no particular order. Trust, faithfulness, tolerance, acceptance, patience, love, affection, self-esteem, initiative, temperance, contentment, curiosity, wonder, joy, lightheartedness, humor, creativity, learning, observation, listening, humility, self-control, fairness, regularity, consistency, determination, endurance, perseverance, respect, dignity, courtesy, honesty, candor, authenticity, generosity, enthusiasm, teachability, attentiveness. There are more, but I can't decide if these are virtues that are specific to me and some of my particular quirks in the bedroom, so I'm not going to list them for you. I don't want to put myself on blast. On the other hand, 1 or 2 of those aren't actually on our list of 101. I added attentiveness and foresight. Attentiveness is analogous to affection, nestled in there with observation and a little splash of availability. And foresight is thinking ahead. Obviously, you know what I'm talking about. If you were the one keeping score out there, there are 101 virtues on our official list, not counting that one little add-on and those ones that are my weird quirky likes. We had 38 virtues out of 101. That's like 37.6% of the virtues, more than 1/3 of the virtues on my list are ones that influence our experience of sexuality. Pursuing virtue can make me a better intimate partner. Light bulb moment. Living out the golden rule can make me a better sex partner. Do you see how this is all related? So there you go. How to have great sex. Study virtue. Figure out what virtues your ideal partner would have, and then pursue them yourself as a kind of blueprint. Rock that golden rule. Speaking of the golden rule, it is now that time of the program where I update you on my attempts to keep to my New Year's resolution, which was to live out the golden rule this year. This week, it had to do with my youngest child, so we're doing a 180 here from talking about sex, babes. He's 6, but on some days he hesitates between wanting to be a baby again on one hand, and on the other, behaving like a teenager. He's the kid that looks like me, talks like me, and thinks like me. So unfortunately for me, but somewhat fortunately for him, I completely get him. You know, for the longest time, when he was difficult to deal with, which was often, I was able to talk to him in a super sweet voice as if he were a teeny tiny baby and would fill up whatever was going on in his heart enough to get out of his rut. This was a daily, multiple times a day occurrence. And it could get quite old when he would pull his little stunt at the exact moment we needed to be leaving the house in a rush. During our vacation, last couple weeks, we didn't have much need to be rushing around, so I didn't have much of a need to baby him. But over the last couple of days, I noticed that he would start whimpering like a puppy at really weird moments. Like when it was time to get out of the car or time to put his shoes on. The babying thing didn't work anymore. As a matter of fact, it seemed to irritate him. So I said, you know, in French, sometimes parents call their kids my chaton, which means my kitten. Is that what you are? Are you my chaton? I am not a chaton, he shouted at me, and I was like, okay. Babe, I don't know how to help you right now, I said to him. I'm not a baby, he replied. Whew. So, trying to take all this on myself, I said, okay, then who are you? I'm Joshua, he said, in this irritable adolescent voice. Wow. All right, Joshua, I replied. Yeah, so we're in this weird transition phase where this young man who used to have this I'm a little baby-sized hole in his heart suddenly wanted to be talked to as an equal. And he was being a little bit awkward about it, and to be fair, so was I. So over the last few days, I've been making a concerted effort to tamp down all of the nicknames that I have for him, all the affectionate little habits I have, and let him show me how he wants our relationship to grow. It's not easy, but I know that it is the respectful thing to do, and it is definitely what I want someone to do for me in a moment of transition. Now, this doesn't always happen, but in this case, there has been an immediate reward. Both days that I have dropped that child off for school this week, he has given me kisses on both cheeks, the way grown-ups do here in France, and then has lavished me with hugs and even a few I love you mamas. This from the child who refused to even acknowledge my existence in the school courtyard. It's like he knows I'm making this effort to respect him in the way that he needs to be respected, and in return, he's giving me all the love in the ways that I need to know that I'm loved. I'm telling you, the golden rule totally rules. There you have it. Episode 60 of Sing With Your Feet. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I want to give you a great big thank you to Seven Productions here in Mulhouse, France for the use of the song La Joie as the intro and outro to the show, to Claude Ekwe who wrote it, and to my friend Matt Kugler who sang it. This is your fairy godmother signing off. Just remember, it is never too late to start singing with your feet.